Welcome everyone to the Damien Marianne Catholic Conference webinar. We welcome you on this beautiful morning, afternoon or evening, depends on where you're at. My name is Deacon Modesto Cordero. I am the president of the board of the Damien Marianne Catholic Conference and also the director of the Office of Worship for the Diocese of Honolulu. We welcome you this morning and to our evangelization through the Corporal Works of Mercy webinar series. This is our second webinar and the first one for this year. Our subject today is St. Marianne Cope of Moloka'i's story, which we have today, and we are honored to have directly from Kalapapa, Sister Alicia Damien Lau, who is a sister of the St. Francis Newman communities for the last 54 years. Sister Alicia is a registered nurse and retired on 2012 as a healthcare executive for 30 years in Hawaii. Currently, she is a volunteer in Kalapapa, Moloka'i, and is currently working part-time for a personal trainer agency as a COVID-19 training specialist and part-time sales associate for the Pacific Historic Parks in Kalapapa bookstore. So the next time that you visit Kalapapa, that's where you can find her, at the bookstore. She has been involved in speaking engagements and organizing different events for St. Damien the Visitor and St. Marianne Cope celebrations in Hawaii and abroad. She has been a frequent visitor to Kalapapa for the past 50 years plus and has seen many changes. It is through the eyes of the former patients, the reading of Sister Leopoldina Burns' journal, that she has come to know the people of Kalapapa and had come to understand how St. Marianne Cope lived at St. Francis of Assisi in simplicity, compassion, unconditional love for the outcasts of society. So again, it is with great honor that we welcome this morning directly from the peninsula of Kalapapa in Moloka'i, Sister Alicia Damien Lau.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Deacon. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon and good evening for those that it is evening for you. It is really a privilege of being here, so I thank you very much for the invitation. I just want to show you the view that I am looking at to give you a sense of what the Bishop Home Complex is like. So I'm going to be taking the camera and just to show you. First of all, I just want to tell you that with me right now is St. Marianne's relic that was given to our congregation. And of course, the Corporate Works of Mercy with the picture behind me with Damien and Marianne. So what I'm showing you now is, this is our front porch, which I was sitting at. But if you take a look at just beyond that big tree, is where Mother Marianne's grave is, and where I go there every single morning, which is such a privilege of being there. But if you take a look at the entire complex and the land that we have here, can you imagine how many different buildings that we had? We probably had about 20 to 25 different buildings, and they were all dormitories for the girls. And of course, all the buildings are down right now. And so this is the front entrance leading up to our convent, St. Elizabeth's Convent doors. So you can see that. So I want to start off with a prayer. It's Mother Marianne's prayer that was from our museum. And let us pray. We pray to St. Marianne. May your hands be cleansed and blessed. Hands for healing, hands for creating, and hands for service. Let them be sacred for reaching out to service to others. We pray for our sick. We pray for our healers and for those who walk with us in faith during these trying times. One of the things that I started to do, and I'm very goal-oriented, I thought I'd just outline for you the goals of this presentation. So St. Marianne managed to care for those with leprosy, during the epidemic of 1866 in Hawaii. Leprosy at that time had changed so many different lives. We're going to explore what the challenges that she encountered in 1880s and how she responded to it. We are really encouraged to look at the same situations as the COVID-19 and how are we handling it. And really, what can we learn from St. Marianne Cope as she lived the corporal work of mercy? And in 1918, the Spanish flu affected probably about 500 million people worldwide, which at that time was about a third of the populations of the earth, of our population. And then, more than probably about 50 million people died of the disease. We had the AIDS epidemic, in which killed 36 million people. Of all of the infectious diseases, the pandemic is probably the worst case scenario. When an epidemic spreads beyond the county's borders, that's when the disease officially becomes a pandemic. So, we find that the more the civilized humans became, building cities, increasing trade, and the routes went all over, connecting through other cities, other continents, and everywhere, waging war against them. That's when most likely the pandemics became. Through it, through the whole ages, when we looked at leprosy grew into a pandemic in Europe and probably the Middle Ages, resulting in building of many numerous leprosy-focused hospitals to accommodate the large number of victims that they had. And because of the international trade, ships were going all the way around the world, bringing not only their goods, but workers. And with that came the disease. A slow developing bacterial disease that caused sores and deformities. Leprosy was believed to be a punishment from God that ran throughout the families. But this belief led to a moral judgment of being shunned, of being rejected, and being ridiculed. Now known as Hansen disease, the World Health Organization estimated probably around 2 to 3 million people who are currently living with Hansen disease or related disabilities globally. And many are living with it undiagnosed. It still affects 10,000s of people every year, and it can be fatal if it's not treated with antibiotics. And according to the World Health Organization, as early as, as late as, 2019, they did an article on one of our patients. And at that time, they said that there were about 200,000 new cases internationally. And this was just a couple of years ago. Leprosy, I would consider it to be what we call a quiet pandemic, in which someone may have the disease for years before it is manifested outwardly. In March 11th of 2020, again, the World Health Organization announced that the COVID-19 virus was officially a pandemic after it barreled through 114 countries. In 3 months, it affected more than 118,000 people, and the spread was not anywhere near finished, as we know today in 2021. So as of today, the COVID cases is probably around 93.3 million people have been affected worldwide. And there are about 2 million people that have died. So, when I took a look at what are the similarities, with leprosy and with COVID, and, both of them were spread worldwide. but there was a public overreaction in support of isolating patients. Leprosy, ironically, that's with Hansen disease, there's very little danger of the contagion. In fact, we know that now 95% of the people are immune to it, and only 5% of the population are susceptible in catching the disease. But the outward signs and the disfigurement is what people were shunned against. And it is believed that in Hawaii, leprosy came from China. And the immigrants from China were coming to work in the pineapple fields and in the sugarcane fields. So by contrast, we know that the COVID is extremely dangerous and contagious. It appears that many people are susceptible in catching the disease and at times are carriers without having any signs of the disease in which they are asymptomatic. So, what are some of the trends that we are looking at and that we've seen? There's fear, and there was fear with both of them. The isolation, really the psychological feelings of depression, anxiety, and other emotional and financial stresses, racism, anger. Because that's all there and all the same. So when I looked at the separating sickness and isolation, I think the more obvious parallel between the experiences of people affecting the COVID today and those affected by leprosy in much of the 20th century is the mandatory isolation and other quarantine procedures that were done. I think of my friend's husband, and she had called me around June, and he had been diagnosed with cancer about 2 years ago. And it has gotten to the worst stage. He was terminal. And he was in the hospital and she could not visit him because of COVID. And so they decided, no, I've got to bring him home. He's got to be with me at the end of his life. And so he did come home with her, and he was on hospice. And then he, eventually had passed away. But then you hear so many of those stories that they can't go in because of COVID. They can't visit. And even with people with COVID, you can't go and visit them within the hospitals. But the Native Hawaiians' response to leprosy was really no different than their response to many other diseases that people had. The family members cared for their sick. The Native Hawaiians did not discriminate against people with leprosy at all. They took care of them. However, it was the fear of the Westerners became evident when the increased number of people were noted to have the disease. So in August of 1864, the law was passed in setting apart land for the establishment of the isolation and the seclusion of those with leprosy. That's here in Hawaii. Every physician and any other person who had knowledge that someone had a case of leprosy had to report it. The Board of Health had the power to send all patients to a place of isolation, which was in Kalawao and Kalapapa. And one of the patients had written and he said, I heard my mother crying and explaining to a neighbor that I had the separating sickness, that I would be put into Kalihi. And Kalihi was a hospital then when they were first diagnosing them. Although I was only 6 years old, I knew that they were separating me from my family, but I did not know that it was going to be a permanent separation. And another patient had said, I was diagnosed when I was 5 years old. My dad was already in Kalapapa, so I was sent there with him, but I was spoiled rotten. I even had the nuns taking care of me. So, I look at that and I say, well, how are we reaching out to people who are alone, who are segregated, who are isolated? I'm looking at our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, our parishioners, and what can we do to help them through the day? When Mother Marianne had received a letter in June of 1883, and she was the second superior general or provincial general of the Sisters of St. Francis at that time in Syracuse, New York. And she received a letter requesting help in the hospitals and teaching in schools. And Mother was really touched by the request and answered. And she said, I am hungry for the work, and I wish with all my heart to be one of those chosen ones of those poor islanders. However, it wasn't until a month later, in July of 1883, when Father Leonor had came from Hawaii and visited Syracuse. And that's when he informed her of the truth, that she was being asked to come to the Sandwich Islands to take care of those with leprosy. And she said at that time, I am not afraid of any disease, and hence it should be my greatest delight even to minister to the poor, abandoned lepers. You know, she came from an immigrant German family. Barbara Cope, as she was, I was born, her name, later became Mother Marianne. But she was always there for her family. And as a sister of St. Francis, she was always there for the sisters. So, you know, it was not a surprise that she answered the call to serve others. So in November of 1883, Mother Marianne and 6 of the sisters had set sail to the Sandwich Islands on the Mariposa. And I did find the roster for the Mariposa. And yes, indeed, her name was on there. Before she left the ship of the Mariposa, the captain of the ship, hearing that they were going to be really taking care of those with leprosy, said to Mother, if you want to leave, let me know, and I will take you back at no charge. Just a side note, you know, I'm going to be using some of the stories from Sister Leopoldina Burns, and she has an unpublished journal that she had written. And it's very interesting that Sister Leopoldina grew up in Utica, New York, same as Mother Marianne. When she was 17 years old, she was 17 years younger than Mother Marianne, and was only 7 years old when Mother had entered the convent at the Syracuse, New York. But, you know, I can imagine that the families had known each other. And when Sister Leopoldina Burns entered the convent 19 years later in 1881 at the age of 26, I'm sure that she had known, you know, Mother Marianne as a sister of St. Francis and was drawn to that. But it was 3 years later after she entered in 1884 that Sister Leopoldina also came to Hawaii. And she was with Mother for the next 34 years when Mother was here. And so after Mother had died, 35 years after she was in Hawaii, Sister Leopoldina was asked to write a journal on the accounts of everything that had happened here. And so she ended up writing 15 books with 56 chapters. And so some of it I'll intertwine into, you know, what happened in here. So that was through the eyes and the perception of Sister Leopoldina Burns. So the Kaka'ako receiving station was different than the Kalihi Hospital that I talked about. It was built in 1881 as an observational place in which it was built for 100 people. However, there were over, in 1883, when the sisters came, there were over 200 people that were there that either had the disease or were expected to have the disease. And several days after their arrival, then the Mother and the sisters went to the Kaka'ako receiving station and saw people with leprosy for the first time. The Board of Health expected these people to take care of themselves. And so they just left them in very poor conditions, helpless and very bitter. While the sisters were touring the facility, what they saw was rough walls, fat bed bugs nested into the cracks of the walls, straw mattresses with dirty blankets laid upon unswept floors. No attempt was to separate the patients according to their sex, their age, or even the stages of illness. And they went to another section of this receiving station. And as the Board of Health director had explained to them, there were 3 rooms. The first room was where the patients who were dying were kept. And one of the sisters, and I believe it was Sister Leopoldina, had seen the person there lying on the floor. So she bent down and she looked at him with these eyes, and he was so sorrowful looking at her with his feverish lips. And so there was a young boy that was standing next to him. And so she said, "Would you go and give him some water?" And so this young boy said, "No, can't give water." He says, "Bye, he died." And so she was just overwhelmed by that. And then after, there was a second room that they went to, and that's where they said that the second room was for, quote, the benefit of the doctors. And after the doctors, I'm just imagining when she had used those terms, that this was probably going to be the autopsy room. And when they were finished with that, then it was put into a third room in which it was waiting to be buried. You know, when I heard that, I kept thinking, I said, you have to realize that less than a month before they arrived to Hawaii, the sisters have been taking care of patients at St. Joseph's Hospital in Syracuse, New York, in a very bright, clean, cheerful room in which Mother Marianne was the administrator since 1870. Mother at that time had brought in the School of Medicine, and the physicians there were bringing all of the new information about Pasteur, about infections, and about infection control. Who would have known at that time that God was preparing her to come to Hawaii and to care for those with leprosy? She surely didn't. And how many times do we do something or learn something that eventually God was preparing us for it? But after touring the facility, Mother said to the sisters, "We have our work cut out for us." And the next day, everybody rolled up their sleeves and they started cleaning the place. What Mother saw as an opportunity to provide the acutely ailing members of society to a safer and comfortable place to live. Mother Marianne and the sisters brought with them all the gifts that God had so freely given them to carry out all of the corporal works of mercy. Are you looking for opportunities to help? You know, 3 months after the sisters arrived, and this was like in January, they came in November, so January of 1884, Queen Capulani said to Mother Marianne if she would please go to Maui and open up a general hospital there. She did. The hospital was already built. All she had to do was to get all of the equipment, all of the, got patients in there, and got the staff to be able to take care of them. And so it was opened in April of 1884, and it was called Malilani Hospital. It is now called Maui Memorial Hospital in Wailuku, and it's still in existence today. And in fact, when I looked at their brochure for their staff, it talks about Mother Marianne starting the Malilani Hospital, which is now Maui Memorial. Mother did not go alone. She went with 2 other sisters. And so what the 2 sisters did when Mother was working in the hospital was to teach English to the Hawaiian girls, and thus establishing the girls' school at St. Anthony's in Wailuku in 1884. And that school also is still in existence. In 1884, and this was around April, I believe, only 5 months after the sisters were in the Sandwich Islands, King Kalakaua spoke at the Legislative Assembly. And he spoke about the poor sanitation conditions of the most contagious disease, which was leprosy he was talking about. And he said, "I am very hopeful of increasing health in my kingdom and the improved sanitary conditions of the country, owing in part to the administration of the Sisters of Charity. And they call the Sisters of St. Francis the Sisters of Charity, meaning, you know, Mother Marianne and the sisters, who have come to help my people with their devotion of spirit and faithful nursing skills, so that I trust that the disease will not only be held in check, but controlled to the point where charity and human skills can attain. That was a real high honor to be, you know, for the king to have said that of the sisters. And then when Mother had gotten back in April of '84 back to the Kaka'ako receiving station, what she found was all of these kids running all over the place. And so what Mother Marianne had said, and she, you know, she said to Mr. Gibson, who was then the director of health, the Board of Health, what she needed to build a home for these kids that's running around. And they were the children of the people with leprosy. And so Queen Capulani also helped to raise the money for the home. And finally, here you see a 2-story house painted gray, which was built near the sisters' residence. And on November 9th in 1885, Mother Marianne christened it as Capulani Home after the Queen Capulani. And so it was dedicated. And according to the book, which I found was a dedication of the Capulani Home, in this book, it really talks about the formal dedication that was held on November 9th in 1885, being very close to the anniversary of the sisters' arrival. The sisters arrived on November 8th, but because November 8th was a Sunday, then they moved it to the 9th. And so, which was the Monday. So Mr. Gibson, who was from the Board of Health, gave a short speech and mentioned that the sisters have won the hearts of our sufferers who they cared for. Queen Capulani then had taken the keys in her hands. And this was part of the book that was there that I got a hold of. And she said she proceeded to the door leading to the refectory, and she put in the key especially marked into the door, unlocked it, withdrawing the key, and handed it to Reverend Mother Superior with the remark, "I deliver these keys to you." The president of the Board of Health then said, by command of His Majesty the King, "I declare the house now open." So Mother accepted the keys. When the king stepped forward, he invited Mother to sit with him. And then he decorated her with the Order of Capulani, which is established by His Majesty to reward the acts of kindness of charity on behalf of his people. The home stayed there until they closed the Kaka'ako receiving station. And part of our sisters had worked in the Capulani home until the 1930s, in which it was closed. So, you know, when we took a look at the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, which really caused a lot of hardship with so many families, you know, that we know that food and supplies are not always available. And we're very grateful for all of the food that has given to so many people that have been out of work and don't have very much. But in 1866, when the patients first came to Kalawao, they were sent here. So you can see how barren it was. Well, you know, the Department of Health, the Board of Health really felt that the patients would be able to fend for themselves, be able to plant their food because that's what they did, go fishing, cook for themselves. However, they were too sick. But you have to realize that this peninsula was inhabited for at least 900 years by the Hawaiian people. The peninsula is a valley that was inhabited by the population of the Hawaiian people, and who were able to grow sweet potatoes, had fishing ponds, were able to pick salt from the salt beds. And of course, as I said before, the Hawaiian people always helped each other. It was just that sense of ohana. And, you know, but this was so different. The early inhabitants began helping all of those with leprosy when they were sent there. However, they were asked to leave, but they weren't going to leave until they had helped as much as they could. But at one point, the government said to them, no, you have to leave. You're forced to leave. And so they had to leave it. And at that time, then the Board of Health did send over the ration of food. But as usual, it was never enough. Food and supplies and everything when they were gotten here was very, very scarce. But I've got to go back a little bit, because in 1888, the Kaka'aka receiving station was closed because they had the Kalihi Hospital, they had the Kalawao County in which they were sending everybody there, and the government was running out of money. So the Kaka'aka receiving station was closed in November of 1888. And so all the patients immediately were sent directly to Kalapapa or to Kalawao. And at that time was when Mother Marianne was asked to come here to take care of the women and the children. Charles Bishop had given $5,000 to build dormitories. And I showed you the land that was here. There are numerous of buildings that were here in dormitories for the girls, built the convent for the sisters. And so Mother Marianne came with two other sisters. And one of them was Sister Leopoldina Burns. And so she followed Mother here to Kalapapa. But what's very interesting, I'm going to go back to Syracuse, New York, because in 1883, the Franciscan Provincial Father, who was at the time responsible for the Sisters of St. Francis in Syracuse, New York, opposed the sisters of coming here to the Sandwich Islands. But the sisters came. And it was amazing that he himself came in 1889. When he came here and he came to Kalapapa, he stayed at the priest's house. And at that time, what they found was that he was having all of his meals here at the convent with the sisters, not with the sisters in a separate room, but the sisters prepared it. Well, he was not very happy. He was very demanding. He was cold. He was critical. And he didn't like the food. And so one day he was that annoyed. He got up from his table, went into the room where the sisters were eating. And Sister Antonia Brown had written, and she said, one day he happened to come into the dining room when the sisters were eating. He saw their scanty table. They had given him their best. And all of a sudden, he just stood there in silence. And from that moment on, never complained again about the food. In another letter, Sister Antonia had mentioned that the grounds that surrounded, the Bishop home was windy, was barren. A lot of the trees that you saw earlier just wasn't there, And so she said, Mother Marianne was the humblest of soul who took part in the roughest work, and she was washing, she was digging, she was planting flowers and fruit trees. And she said 15 years later, there were 321 variety of fruit trees on the Bishop home grounds. And she says, among them were the Chinese oranges, avocados, mangoes, grapes, lemons, and other Hawaiian fruits. And, when we walk around and we do have avocados and we do have banana trees and we do have mango trees on our yard. So, we're very blessed when it's in season that we can relish this without having to try to bring it in. And it was in, 1903, also, Mother had written a letter to Dr. Cooper, who was then the president of the Board of Health. And she says, during these years, it has been customary to take the children to the valley of Waikolu. And when you saw that one barren place, the valley is all the way in there. So it's quite a distance, probably about 2.5 miles, from Bishop home. And she said she would take the girls there about 3 or 4 times a week to get the guavas and mountain apples, during the season. Oh, there goes, we have deer running around and one just went right past me. Oh, well. Yes, we have a number of deer here. So, you know, Mother Marianne did everything she could to assist to bring food in from Honolulu. However, many of the captains of the small freighter trains of the ships, freighter ships, were afraid and refused to go to Kalaupapa because they were afraid of the disease. And oh, how the Hawaiians missed their poi. And then 1897, I just love this. It's mother's handwriting, and she had written a letter to Myers. And at that time, she said, "We have 6 lime trees full of fruit and 2 Chinese orange trees drooping with golden fruit. 2 small apple trees are in blossom. And this gives us the courage to plant more." Many people, since COVID have been at home with so much time on their hands. And because of the food is imported, into Hawaii, they have returned many of them to the Aina, to their land. And many of them have started to plant their own food. We have several of our staff here in Kalaupapa doing that. A kahu from the Big Island had said that, yes, they started also to, start planting their own food that was there. So, Mother Marianne had given the patients and the children a sense of dignity. And according to, Sister Magdalena Miller, she wrote that the doctors mentioned her psychology was about 50 years ahead of her time. Mother Marianne was the gentlest, the more cheerless, the most dignified person that you could ever imagine. And a disciplinarian too. But she brought cleanliness, she brought pride, and she brought fun, to the colony. And, in 1870, when she was the administrator of St. Joseph's Hospital in Syracuse, Sister Soasina had witnessed this, and she said, "I often saw Reverend Mother, going around visiting the sick at night, ministering to them, especially the poor, and doing little acts of kindness, which was not seen by anyone. And what she did was to carry that practice to Kalaupapa." But, Mother Marianne was also a woman of great control and very serene when things did not go smoothly. But when things goes beyond her control, and especially when it harmed others, she reacted much differently. Bishop Home was a place for the girls and the young women, but later it became a refuge for the mistreated children, by their family members, and by women who were abused. It is no different than what we see today. People are taking their anger on their loved ones. Mother was always on call, and Sister Benedicta had said, she will willingly sacrifice her rest and that of the sisters to watch over the inmates of the home, to prevent any harm of body or soul to befall upon them. She was ever ready to rise at night to comfort the suffering, and that she did. And I can imagine, the healthcare workers and healthcare givers and their first respondents after long hours of work must feel when they lose a patient, they lose someone they've been taken care of. And it's hard to forget, and take a look at how can we support them. And, there was another letter in the Department of Health records that from McVeigh. And he was speaking of Bishop Home, and he said, the superintendent had mentioned that the patients were advanced and requiring constant care. And he went on to say that the good mother and sisters have been working more than what they should be asked to perform. They have labored among the people over the 20 years without complaining, for the increased work, without vacation or rest. From their own personal observations of their daily work, their breaking point is not far off. I would suggest, he said, that the Board of BA seek to persuade 2 more sisters to come and assist them in this noble work. And Sister Barbara Jean had reminded me, that their pay at that time, they did get paid, was $20 a month. You know, and then we take a look at, you know, do we ourselves go beyond what's asked of us? You know, do we give all, you know, without complaining? You know, well, you know, one of the patients, when I took a look at, you know, some of the writings that the patients had done, and he was here in about 50 years in Kalapapa, and he said, I was only 7 and I did not know what was happening. They came to get me at school, and I think the teacher reported me to the Board of Health. First, I went to Kalihi, and then they sent me here to Kalapapa. Oh, how I miss my mommy. And when you took a look at when the patients were allowed in Kalapapa to have visitors, you know, and they cherished all of the family visits. However, strict rules were in place, you know, that prohibited physical contact. And so what you see in front of you right now is the longhouse. You know, patients met with their families in this longhouse. It was a narrow building with heavy wire fence down the center of it, separating the patients from their family members and their loved ones. There were separate doors in which they entered, and there are separate doors in where they exit. And the reason for the fence that was between them was so that they would not touch each other. You know, and one of the patients had said to me that probably the saddest day of her life was on her wedding day. Her mother came and she could not hug her. She also mentioned that when they were out walking, she says, a worker was behind them, following them, just to ensure that they did not touch each other. When we took a look at the original pictures of the convent, at the time of Mother Marianne, there was a fence that was closer and surrounded the house itself. But in 1935, when they rebuilt the convent that we're currently in, St. Elizabeth Convent, the fence went all the way around the perimeters of where the road is. And over the years, of course, many of the fences were in the doctor's house that was there, and some of the houses that, you know, we see remnants of it. But over the years, they have fallen down and they have rotted, or they were taken down. So when we take a look at what currently, and you may have seen it at the entrance of St. Elizabeth's Convent, you'll see this is what's remaining of the front gate, which was surrounded all by the picket fence. On one side, as you can see, was separate by the gate itself, and the other side was another sitting area. So that's where the patients came to visit the sisters. The patients stayed on one side and the sisters stayed on the other side until the whole area was lifted for the ban. You know, when I took a look at, you know, the message of hope, Mother taught the girls how to take care of themselves. And what she did was to really empower them, you know, and she taught them how to sew, she taught them how to make lace, how to clean, how to take care of the younger girls. And, you know, one day she knew that they were going to leave Bishop Home. You know, they were going to get married and they had a family that they needed to take care of and a household. And so a lot of work was done at the Bishop Home by the girls. But the pay was very, very little for them. And so what Mother started to do with them is that they started, after they're finished working, they were found to be busy as bees, as Sister Leopoldina had said, making lace. But soon they lost interest. And one day Mother Marianne said to them, girls, I thought you liked to make lace. What has changed? Oh, Mother, they said, what's the use? We're lepers. What can we do with the lace? Everybody will be afraid of it. Why, I want it, said Mother. When you're finished, she said, fold up your lace nicely, put your price on it, and we will sell it here in the settlement. You must make the price higher on account that it's made by your own hands. And it's worth more than what they can pay, although they have the money and would perhaps like the lace better at the higher price. And then Mother went to one of the girls and she said to her, I wish you would try to help and sell the lace for the girls. And you can have 10% of the income. Wow. And so she did. She went out, mother had fixed the box very nicely, had put all the lace in it with each of the girls' names and the price on it. So she went out early in the morning, came back later in the evening, and it was all sold. And she returned the next evening and she could not believe it. Everything was sold. So, you know, in the midst of uncertainty, Mother Marianne never lost hope that God will protect her as well as the sisters. And one day when Sister Leopoldina was doing the dressing changes, one of the doctors came in. She was in a very small closed area. And the doctor said to her, as I believe that there is a God, you will get the disease. Well, Sister Leopoldina got very scared and very frightened. And she went to Mother Marianne. Mother Marianne, the doctor said, we're going to get the disease. And Mother Marianne said to her, I know that we're all exposed. I know too that God has called us to this work. And if we are prudent, we will do our duty. He will protect us. Do not allow it to trouble you. And when the thought comes to you, drive it away. Drive it from your mind. And remember that you will never get the disease, nor were any of our sisters in our order. And to this day, none of our sisters had ever contracted the disease. She had put all her trust in our Creator, that He will protect her and will protect all the sisters after her. I can just imagine some of those nurses and the first responders, the doctors must feel when they're caring for their patients. Will they contract the COVID-19? Will take it home to their families, to their loved ones? Let us continue to pray for their safety. You know, we have heard so much about racism in the past years. You know, it's nothing new. It's not limited to white or black, but it crosses all races and denominations and all ages. In 1883, Mother and the sisters arrived in the Hawaiian Islands, not knowing the culture, not knowing, you know, the language, not knowing, you know, who they were going to care for. But everything was foreign to them, including the political, social, economical environment. So how did she handle it? She did not try to change the language, nor stop or ridicule the cultural practices or religion, but instead, she tries to understand them and to be present to them. You know, while in Kaka'aku, you know, they learned to speak Hawaiian Pidgin. So it was all mishmash of different languages. So yeah, it was Hawaiian, was English, was German, was French, Portuguese, in order to communicate to the people that were there. But it wasn't until she came to Kalapapa in an enclosed environment that everybody was speaking Hawaiian, because 95% of the people that were here were Hawaiian or part Hawaiian. And so she learned to speak and understand the Hawaiian language. And so did Sister Leopoldina. So majority of the people that I said that were here were Hawaiian. So they retained their language. They retained a lot of their culture. And so what was interesting to note is that Mother Marianne and the older patients taught the younger children how to read Hawaiian, not English, Hawaiian. One day, you know, in 1894, some of the books that were sent from Honolulu were in English. She had asked for it in Hawaiian. And so the text was sent in error. And Mother Marianne looked at that and she says, no, I asked for books in Hawaiian. And so it was for the boys' home and at the Baldwin home. And so what she did was to find them unsuitable. And so she returned them to the company. She says, it's not what I asked for. So, you know, Mother Marianne allowed and encouraged the girls to dance the hula. And then on several occasions, you know, Mother Marianne had to deal with some of the girls and the young women who believed that there were evil spirits or evil gods that were invading their dormitories at night. Mother Marianne did not attempt to change their minds, but said that no evil spirits were threatening them. She didn't say that. Instead, what she did was to say to them, went to their dorms, she pulled up a chair and she sat there. And she gave them the courage by her presence to calmly accept what was going on and stay there until the girls fell asleep. And the next morning, the girls would run up to her and say, "Mother, there's no evil spirits anymore in the dorm." So, you know, when I take a look at, you know, Pope Francis, he's got a new book that's out that's encouraging the valuing and welcoming of, you know, the human life. And he said, solidarity is not the sharing of crumbs from the table, but to make space at the table for everyone. And that's what Mother Marianne did. Another person that I just love is Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And like Mother Marianne, she did not try to change the world and to speak out against local injustice. But both of them loved one and all, and they put their time and their energy in letting God change others. Like St. Francis, they lived the Gospels through their actions. And you're going to be hearing more about Mother Teresa of Calcutta next month. So thank you. I know it was long, but there's so much about Mother Marianne that we can even begin to talk about. So thank you.
Thank you, Sister Alicia. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. We still have some time. So what we would like to do now is to ask if you have any specific questions for Sister Alicia. If you can go ahead and type them in the chat room, and we will go ahead and have Sister Alicia answer them. So as you do that, Sister Alicia, I really would like to ask you, could you share with us your personal experience? I know that you were there when they exhumed the body of Sister from the Kalapapa, and also, you know, when she was taken during the process of her canonization, and also your experience and feelings when the remains were brought back to Hawaii, and they are now in the Cathedral Basilica. Can you share about that experience?
That's another hour.
Well, you had a couple of minutes.
It was absolutely mind-boggling because we had the patients here, we had people from Syracuse, you know, and of course the Natural Park Service. Everybody was just, you know, eye-boggling, just watching every single movement that was happening. We had 6 forensic team members here from the Army who had helped and really had gone through the whole process with it. When they were digging and we sifted through all of the dirt to ensure that there was nothing there, they didn't find anything until they got 6 foot down. And that was like 2 days later, because like I say, they were very careful doing that. As soon as they found her remains, we had the media here from Syracuse, from Hawaii. We had about, you know, like 10 different media. And so what they did was to stop, and they told the media that they could not be there when they removed all of the remains of Mother Marianne. So I ended up taking them to Kalawao and showing them around and everything. So when we came back, it was already done. But prior to that, when they found her remains, one of the patients, Nellie, had said, "How could you do this? How could you take her from us? You know, she was here with us for 30 years in Kalapapa. She took care of us for 35 years, and now you're taking her away from us." But we, as the Sisters of St. Francis, knew that we did not know what was going to happen to the land, the Aina, the Kalapapa, once the last patient goes. And so we had to ensure that her remains, you know, was protected. And so Vince Ava said to us, and I says, "Can I tell them?" I said, "Yeah." Basically what he said was, because Mother had osteoporosis, much of her bones were in the soil. So in essence, she is still here. So what we removed was the larger, you know, bones that was there. So they, so all of a sudden the patients were fine with that. So we had the ceremony at St. Francis Church. We put her on Kamaka Air. Sister Davelin went along with the casket, you know, to Borthwick. When they got to Borthwick, one of the things that they had done, because they put her into a zinc box in which we ended up, when it got to Borthwick, it was soldered, sealed, never to be opened. And so what we had also done at the gravesite was to take a large number of the soil, and ended up finding later, the forensic team, a lot of her bone fragments. And that's what we have, you know, here at Mother's Relic, is some of the bone fragments that was there. And so we held on to a lot of the soil, you know, that was there. So then she went to the Cathedral Basilica. We had the ceremony to send her out. She went back to Syracuse. We were there to also have a ceremony for her, and took some of the kahilis that we had made. And then all of a sudden, St. Anthony's Convent, our mother house, in which Sister was part of it, was going to be sold. And so immediately our leadership had asked the bishops who would like to take care of her. And immediately Bishop Silva, who has family here in Kalapapa, said, I will. And so they sent her back to Hawaii about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And it was probably the most joyous time of the people in Hawaii. Mother came back. And I always said, Mother, being Mother, always had in her mind that she did not want to leave. We could have sent her out. Yes, we did. But she found her way back to us in Hawaii. So I'd say, thank you, Mother. She never wanted to leave, and now she's back with us. So we're very grateful for that.
Thank you, Sister, for sharing. I was honored to be present during those ceremonies, and it was really, really very touching. We had a couple of questions, Sister. We had a question from Julie. She's asking, you mentioned the 95% of the people that were Hawaiian, Can you talk about what religion they were practicing at that time? And also, were most from Oahu? I mean, the leprosy mostly came from Oahu. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, no, leprosy was statewide. I mean, it was from the Big Island. There was a family member from Maui whose son had gotten the disease, took him to the doctor, and he told the doctor, I'll give you $1,000. And at that time, you know, it was a lot of money. If you don't tell the government. She says, no, I have to, you know. So Maui, Kauai, I know some of the patients came from Kauai. It's all of the islands that was there. You have to realize that when Captain Cook came in the 1700s, he brought with him a lot of the diseases, you know, so smallpox, chickenpox, and everything. The Hawaiian people do not have the immunity to ward off a lot of the diseases that was brought in. And leprosy was one of them. So most of us, you know, are immune to almost everything, you know, now, but the Hawaiian people were not. They were very susceptible to a lot of the diseases, and especially leprosy. And it went, you know, because they're such a close-knit family, it spread from one to the other. However, you know, we had one family member that had probably about 5 or 6, I just found out the 6th one, of the family members that were here, you know, in Kalapapa. Whereas one that had, you know, siblings, probably about 5 of them, and was only one out of that family member that had gotten it. No one else in his family had gotten it, you know, that was here. So it's really hard to, and that's what they couldn't figure out. How was it transmitted, you know? And so now they believe that, you know, it could be airborne, and that's what they believed. And that's why the doctor had said, you know, you're in such a closed area, you're going to get the disease. But also that prolonged, you know, handling of the disease, you know, look at Damien. You know, Damien was not afraid to do their dressing changes. Well, neither were the sisters, but the sisters practiced a little bit more sanitary conditions in doing the dressing changes than probably, Damien did. But they didn't have gloves at that time, they didn't have masks at that time, and doing that.
We had quite a few thank you notes for you for all the sharing and the great story that you have presented to us. But in particular, I wanted to mention this one from Mr. Ed Paz. He just mentioned that he just moved to Wailuku, Maui, and he works now at the Maui Memorial Hospital. And he never knew the story of St. Marianne opening the hospital on Maui. So he really appreciates your sharing that today.
Yes.
We had a question, another question.
Yeah.
Another question for Julie. Can you describe a bit more of what conditions people were living in when Mother Marianne arrived?
Well, when Mother Marianne arrived in, 1888, here, of course, there were, dormitories. There were still very scanty rations that were here. It wasn't until the, let's see, I think it was the 1900s when they decided to close the Kalawao Baldwin home and bring everybody here because it was a drier place, much drier. They started, there were homes and, that was built here because it was for the kukua, and the people. Because even Sister Leah Budina talks about, some of the homes that they went to. The conditions was probably much better than the 1860s when the patients first came in Kalawao, in which they had no shelter, they had no place really, and they had to really literally, sleep out. In fact, Damien did. Damien slept under the pandanus tree because there was no, but it was Damien who was able to bring in a lot of the wood. He was a carpenter and he built a lot of the houses there. And, at that time too, there was no running water. So they had to go and get the water. And, the sisters talk about, in the early days having to go out and get buckets of water, until they actually were able to put pipes in to bring it from the stream in the Wailuku Valley.
Okay. Another comment that came from Titi Ricaford. This was a very informative talk of Mother Marianne, having visited Kalapapa and now having a better understanding of what my family members who are buried there endured during that time and how Mother Marianne and her group of sisters care for them with St. Damien. You also mentioned that our own Bishop, Larry Silva, has a family member buried there too. Do you know something about that? Do you know about who's buried there? There's a member of the Silva's family?
Great.
Yeah, I believe it is his great-great-grand uncle, which the last name is
Silva.
It wasn't Silva. It escapes me right now. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Right. But I think Julia had asked also, or Julie had asked a question about religion.
Yes.
We had primarily a lot of the Protestants that were here, like say the Protestants were here before those with leprosy were sent in the 1860s. So, and there was a community of Protestants. The Calvinists were here. The Latter-day Saints came much later and they brought their own religion. What happened too was because one of the Protestant ministers shortly before Damien came, his wife was here. So he came along with her as a kukua, a helper. And so, that kind of ended up a very strong Protestant group that was here. And Silawama Church was built shortly after that. But one of the things that Damien did was to be with the people. When you take a look at the number of patients that were converted. And in fact, I read once recently that somebody said, oh, he didn't want to be around when Damien came because what he was doing was prophesizing and, trying to get everybody to, join the Catholic religion. And, but it was really through the actions of Damien that people saw and believed that his God, you know, was a wonderful person. So later you'll see that whole trend of the Catholicism, you know, really being probably the most prominent religion, you know, here. But we did have the Buddhists, because we did have a Buddhist temple that's there. And in fact, that's where the bookstore is currently. You know, and we still have the Protestant church that's currently here with its minister, you know, that's here on the island.
Bernard Lee went all the way from Vancouver. He wants to know if you can share what were the answered prayers of Saint Marianne before her canonization. I guess he's asking about the miracles.
Were the two miracles?
Yeah.
It was Kate Mahoney. And Kate Mahoney had, at a very young age, had endometrial cancer. And I believe she was 14. And she had surgery, and all of a sudden she was doing fairly well. And then they decided to start her on chemotherapy. And when they started her on chemotherapy is when all of a sudden she had such a reaction to it that she had a total system shut down. And so her kidneys started not working. Her, she went into heart failure, and just, you know, everything, her liver was not detoxicating everything. And she was going into a coma. And the family had known, you know, Sister Mary Lawrence. And so they called Sister Mary Lawrence and they said to her, would you please, you know, help and pray with her? So Mary Lawrence had brought in a holy card that had Mother Marianne's handwriting on it. So she brought that into the hospital, put it on her, and prayed. And the next day, all of a sudden, her systems started working again. Her kidneys started working and functioning, her liver, her heart, she was no longer in heart failure, and she just miraculously got better. And the doctors could not explain it. And Kate Mahoney is still in Syracuse. She's doing quite well. And she was here probably about, I would say about a year and a half ago. And it was so great to, you know, meet with her again. But she's doing a whole series of talks and what people, you know, and on Mother Marianne prior to her feast day, which is next week, Saturday. And so you can see Kate Mahoney, she's just a lovely girl. And she does have a book out called The Miracle Girl, I believe it is. The second one, yeah, the second one was Smith, and she was an older woman, and she ended up with pancreatitis, and it just changed. You know, it just, I mean, she was always sick for a while, and because the doctors had said to her, you know, with this pancreatitis and she said, there's nothing we can do for you, you know, so get your self in, you know, in order that, you know, be prepared really to die. And so she was very, very sick, and she also had her systems shutting down. And one of the family members had known one of our sisters, and it was shortly after we did the exhumation. And so a lot of the sisters had soil that they had taken with them back to Syracuse. And so one of the sisters went to visit her with a group of the sisters, and they prayed with her, and they put the soil of Mother Marianne on her patient gown. And again, all of a sudden, she just started to get better and to improve. And again, they could not explain, you know, why. And that was, again, the second miracle that was there.
Thank you, sister. Thank you for everything you have shared. Comments are still coming, saying how inspiring this presentation has been. We even had a nurse sharing how emotional she got by listening to your story and your presentation. I wanted to mention to everyone this with us this morning, that or afternoon or evening, depends on where you are, that this presentation is being recorded, and the presentation as well as the slides the sister presented today, they are going to be in our website, which is dmcchawaii.org. Give us about midweek next week, and you can go and check it out, and you will find the presentation so you can see it again. And sister also on her slides are presenting to us all her references. Here they are, so you can see where she got the information from and the different books that had been written, especially the journals of Sister Leopoldia Burns. So you can find those books in many bookstores, or you can just contact Sister and she probably will let us know where we can get them. As we are coming to the end of today's webinar, I would like to share with you what is coming next. So the Damien Marianne Catholic Conference is proud to announce that our next webinar will be on March 20th, and it's going to be the story of Saint Teresa of Calcutta as a contemplative prayer and witness in action. Father William Petrie, which is a Sacred Heart priest, he did work with Sister Teresa and know her personally. He is going to be our speaker, so you don't want to miss that. That's going to be a wonderful webinar. Then on May 15, today with us, we had somebody from Virgin in our presentation, but he had to leave. A group from Virgin is going to be with us on May 15 to speak about and sharing the history and legacy of the through cross cultures. And then we're going August 14 and August 16, we are going to have the Hawaiian monarchs and Saint Damien, and the Hawaiian monarchs and Saint Marianne relationship in two parts. So you don't want to miss that next August and October. And then we're going to end the year on December 11th with the story of Brother Joseph Dutton. As you know, Brother Joseph Dutton, he was also Kalapapa, and he helped Damien and Marianne on taking care of the lepers. And right now we are working on progressing on his cause to become hopefully our third saint here in Hawaii. So again, this is our layout of webinars for the rest of the year. You can find all this information in our website, again, dmcchawaii.org. This is just some pictures of the presentations. Here we got Sister Teresa, Brother Dutton, the tomb of Damien in Virgin, and some of the monarchs pictures in there. And again, our next one, Father William Petrie, on March 20th, again a Saturday from 10 to 11:30. The Damien Marianne Catholic Conference, as you know, we are a nonprofit organization, and our goal and our goal is to educate the people and bring the stories of our saints, especially Marianne and Damien, into the world. And we are constantly looking to, well, educate, inspire, and empower people with the stories, like the one that Sister Alicia shared with us today. Well, in order for us to do this, we need your help. And we are really honored to have you with us this morning, sharing on your Saturday morning, especially on this long holiday weekend. But we also would love if you can help us so that we can continue our function and our mission by donating whatever you can. You know, we asking for $10 gift, but whatever is that you can donate, you can go again to our website, dmcchawaii.org, and right on the top of the main page, you're going to see a button that says donate. So you can click in there, and your donations are all tax deductible. I know that we are starting a brand new year, so as you're deciding who's going to be the people you're going to be donating in 2021, please consider us, the Damien Marianne Catholic Conference. We are also seeking for volunteers. There are many volunteers opportunities in our group. So if you are interested in offering your time, your talent to the Damien Marianne Catholic Conference, please contact us. You can email us at volunteerdmcc@gmail.com, or you can follow us through Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Yes, we are all in the social media too. So you can follow us, and please enter your input, your questions, your concerns, and how you can help us. Your help is really highly appreciated. Well, again, we thank you for being with us this morning. We thank you for your time. We hope to see you back in March 20th for the webinar on St. Teresa of Calcutta. And as we end this morning, we are going to have a special blessing. The sister Alicia is going to give us with the relic of St. Marianne, who she has right behind her. So sister, again, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Thank you for your time, for your inspiration, and for your words. And what a gift to us it is to have all of you, Sisters of St. Francis here in Hawaii, helping us and being with us. And for you, and I know the other sisters being there on Kalapapa, still assisting the patients and maintaining the mission and the love of Sister Marianne alive among us. It is an honor to really, really know all of you and being with you. So please give us a blessing.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I do, I just want, Sister Barbara Jean did find Bishop Larry Silva's relatives, and there were two of them that was here. John Santos and an aunt that was Minnie Santos Arruda. So Bishop Silva had really two relatives that was here. So Sister Barbara Jean is going to recite the prayer that we recite every day here at Kalapapa at St. Francis Church. And I will then hold the relic up to you. Go ahead.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O God and Father of all, we praise you, the source of all we have and all we are. We thank you for our beloved St. Damien and St. Marianne, who ministered to your people in Kalawao and Kalapapa on the island of Moloka'i. Faithful to the teaching and example of your Son, Jesus Christ, they loved and served the most desolate outcast on this peninsula, giving themselves generously and heroically for the victims of Hansen's disease. Through their intercession, grant us the courage to follow their footsteps in our love for those most in need of our love and our care. Help us to love you with all our hearts and to love our neighbor as they modeled for us. For you have said, love one another as I have loved you. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, sisters. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. We will see you around. If not, we will see you in March 20th. So after this presentation, you will be receiving a survey online through your emails. Please answer that survey because it helps us continue knowing what we can do better to serve you. So again, aloha, mahalo, until the next time.